So let's make it clear straight away, 9 times out of 10 it actually has nothing to do with the person holding the belt. It's the promotion that controls the championship, where they accidentally make it fall into the trash. Sometimes literally. So of course, over the years, many of these belts have gone away, and now we look back on them and we're like, why did we do it like that? They deserved so much more. So where are the times that this went really long? My name is Simon Miller, and it's time for a list. Number 10, the WCW World Heavyweight Title, which was last held by Chris Jericho in 2001. Because did you know, at a pay-per-view, he beat Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock on the same night? I know. Now, this was at Vengeance, and let's face it, if you do go back to that time period, Christopher Jericho absolutely deserved this. It was time to elevate him up the top of the card, and now look back, he had a pretty good career. Of course, because the WWF, as it was known then, was merging these titles together, it just meant that the WCW big gold belt that had a credible amount of history, well, it just vanished into the abyss. I mean, when Jericho dropped in at WrestleMania 18 to Triple H, nobody was mentioning the fact that it did used to be 2 titles. And listen, Christopher Jericho was absolutely a fine choice to be the last guy, but we never discussed it. It just moved into the Phantom Zone, and we all had to move on like we hadn't once seen David Arquette win it. So it was just sad, especially if you were a hardened WCW fan. You didn't even get to have a proper goodbye. Number 9, the GFW Global Title. I mean, I'm not sure there was ever a good time for this championship, and I respect Jeff Jarrett for always trying to launch new promotions and have a competitive, healthy space in the wrestling landscape. That was kind of gibberish what came out of my mouth, but it's true. I mean, Global Force Wrestling was founded in 2014 and was meant to be an alternative to TNA and WWE. And look, who was the first champion? Nick Aldis. That makes all the sense in the world. That dude knows how to feel important. He held it for 547 days, but a major reason for that is because GFW could never really get going properly until, of all people, he dropped it to Alberto Del Rio. This was in 2017, and after 71 days, Alberto and Bobby Lashley went head-to-head, and this is when GFW and TNA were kind of working together, and when Del Rio did get the victory, he now held both these prizes. Surprise, surprise, nobody was calling it the GFW title after that, so it's like the WCW belt. One day it was just gone. Difference here is that that one didn't have any lineage. 43 days after this too, Alberto Del Rio was stripped of the championship, given everything that did go down with his then-girlfriend Paige, and we don't need to get into it. But talk about a controversial way to go out of fashion. This was not good. Number 8, the original WWE Women's Title. So this is from back in the day, and some people say, oh my gosh, it was born in 1956. And other people go, no, we can trace it back to 1948. This is the belt that the Fabulous Moolah had, Wendy Richter, Sensational Sherri, Trish Stratus, Lita, when eventually it would end up in the hands of Harvey Whippleman. You can see what happened to this. Even when Layla and Michelle McCool were co-champs, it was quite fun, because even though Layla had technically put it around her waist, because they were such good buddies, they were just like, we don't care, we are the co-champions. Layla defeated Beth Phoenix to do this, but then at Night of Champions 2010, it was Michelle McCool as the women's champion, taking on Melina as the Divas champion, and when eventually they got to the finish, once again these belts were merged. It was even more silly because it was a lumberjill match, and then by the end of it, WWE just went, you're all divas now. So poor Layla just got totally murked, and as we now know, it was not a good way to tie it into the women's roster, but it was never talked about again until eventually they did bring back the women's championship, like what, 10 years later? What a ridiculous roller coaster. I mean, ultimately, you wouldn't have retired a men's belt this way, so we shouldn't have done it here either. Number 7, the NXT UK Tag Team Titles. So we could talk about NXT UK till the cows come home, because essentially one day we all woke up, the promotion had just stopped. And I get that it wasn't as popular as people hoped, but these were still real people with real livelihoods. I can't imagine that was very fun. The tag team scene there was great as well, because you had the Grizzled Young Vets, Moustache Mountain, Morgan and Andrews, Pretty Deadly, and eventually they would all have time with the tag team titles until it went to none other than Brooks Jensen and Josh Briggs. And this was fine because we were trying to build new stars, but then after 73 days, all of a sudden Pretty Deadly took these guys on, and they won, but that meant now they were the NXT US Tag Team Champions, and nobody ever spoke about the UK ones again. Now, Josh and Jensen have actually gone on to do pretty well for themselves. I mean, they had a career, but this just comes down to what was written on the marquee. It would have been really nice if one of these UK tag teams that was synonymous with the scene was actually be able to say fare thee well to these belts, but instead, it was like everything else with NXT UK. One day it was there, then it just wasn't. Number 6, the WCWA Heavyweight Title. Right, time to go back in time. damn it. The WCWA Heavyweight Championship used to be the main belt down in world class, and if you know anything about your wrestling history, that was an important promotion. It soon became just another prize though when it too was merged with the AEW World Title, when Jerry Lawler of all people beat Kerry Von Erich. This was a Super Clash 3, but because the match ended in shenanigans, the commissioner whoever decided, you know what, we need to hold this belt up. So then it was basically presented to vacant. And then in April 1989, they did it again, and surprise, surprise, it was the King that got the belt. But then jump forward to September of the next year, and all of a sudden we're here again. It just wasn't around. Now, as it turns out, this thing got deactivated. And if you're confused, don't worry, everybody else was too. Because having something that had this much history attached to it just fall out of the window was nonsense. I mean, Bruiser Brody had held this, Rick Rude, and of course all four of the Von Erichs. So for a Memphis legend, and he was a Memphis legend, like Jerry Lawler to be the guy that had it last, well, that didn't tie into Texas at all. The fact he got it via screw job too, or essentially just muddied the waters, it just goes back to everything that we've already said. If you do have a plan to get rid of a title, at least put a little bit of respect on it. Number 5, the FCW Tag Team Titles. So the last team to hold the Florida Championship Wrestling Tag Team Titles was Brad Maddox and Rick Victor. Now, in case you don't know, FCW was NXT before NXT became FCW, or something like that. And if you go on your internet device right now, you will see a lot of stars of tomorrow there. The most successful team in history was most definitely Bray Wyatt and Bo Dallas, as they did the brother thing. But there was Seth Rollins, there was Roman Reigns, there was Drew McIntyre. Once again, a bunch of people that are on the main roster right now, they were tag team champs back in FCW. Of course, at the time, as they were rookies, we would just throw duos together when Britney Spears snuck in the door again, because oops, it happened again. Maddox and Rick held it for 17 days, and then FCW was shite. I mean, Victor did go on to be part of the Ascension that did pretty damn well for a while. And well, Brad Maddox was Brad Maddox. He's another guy you should probably just go Google. He did screw over Ryback in 2013, but it just goes back to what I keep on saying, like a broken record. Given the amount of people that did walk through that building, well, it would have been nice if it could have got a proper send-off. I mean, Big E was a tag team champion down there. I don't think we handled it right at all. Number 4, the Lucha Underground title. Lucha Underground was great, and if every part of the corporate hierarchy could have been on the same page, well, it probably would have been around today. Instead, it lasted just over 4 years, and it was the Lucha Underground title that would speak to you, because Ricochet held this, John Morrison, Jeff Cobb, and even the Lucha Bros. It also eventually found its way to Jake Strong, and if you're saying, well, that name sounds familiar, it should do. We're talking about Jack Swagger, or Jake Hager. He defeated Penta at Ultimate Lucha when he cashed in one of his magical prizes. When, yep, you know what I'm going to say, Lucha Underground season ended. Apparently that was that. During the time off, this belt just never did return, meaning, yep, Strong was the last guy who ever held it. Now look, he did have the pedigree for this, but if you are talking about Lucha Underground dudes, well, I want to be that guy, probably wouldn't come to mind after you've done a long old list. Now once again, I'm sure there were plans in place to ensure this didn't happen. That just sums up the promotion. At one point we were on top of the world, then a few days would pass, and nobody knew what the flub was going on. Number 3, the ECW title. So unless it was somebody from the OG ECW, all the hardcore fans were gonna be mad. As you're about to see, nobody would have predicted this back in 1998. Now if we are talking about the original title, it was Rhino that last had it before Extreme Championship Wrestling went out of business, and nobody can get mad about that. Rhino was flipping ace. Of course, WWE then revived the brand from 2006 to 2010 and put it on Sci-Fi. However, CM Punk held it, Christian held it, RVD held it. Ain't no one gonna be pissed about that. They're good choices. None of them had it though when WWECW did go away, because that honor failed to Ezekiel Jackson. Now before we go any further, this ain't no disrespect to Big Zeke. He absolutely had the potential, especially in WWE, to go all the way, but they never capitalized on this. So to think that he was the last ever ECW champion, well, if you bought into everything Paul Heyman was putting out there, it was never gonna fly. So once again, I suppose it just comes down to the fact that if you were able to get in some kind of DeLorean and go back to 99 and said, oh yes, Ezekiel Jackson will be the last guy with that belt, well, have you seen ECW? There would have been a riot. Of course, too, Extreme Championship Wrestling was such a passion project. WWE kind of sucked all the energy out of it. So overall, it pretty much just sucked. Number 2, the WCW World TV title. This one hurts a little bit, because do you know how Jim Duggan became the WCW TV World Hoopla Champion? He found the thing in a dump. Now this was just before Vince Russo and Eric Bischoff were about to reset the entire promotion, meaning all the belts were going to have new champions. But I guess some creative writer was like, oh my gosh, they don't care about this one, so I'll give it to Hacksaw. And listen, he did defend it, even though he found it in the bin. And most of the time it was against Finn Finlay. 54 days later, we did hit the big old button on this reset, and the belt just was never seen again. Meaning, as much as I love Jim Duggan, he was the last champion after finding it in the trash. Do I really have to say anything else? No. Number 1, the WWE Cruiserweight title. So let's be honest, when the WWE made their light heavyweight championship, it was just because they wanted to go toe-to-toe with WCW. So when they bought the damn thing, all of a sudden it was the Cruiserweight title. It always felt like Vince McMahon didn't care about it though, but if you did go back to World Championship Wrestling, I mean Chris Jericho, Dean Malenko, Rey Mysterio, Eddie Guerrero, these are all-time greats. If you go to Halloween Havoc 1997, you can watch Eddie and Ray fight over this thing, and it's one of the best matches ever. WWE never did the same though, meaning our last champion was Hornswoggle. This would have been great if it wasn't treated as a lol, but it most definitely was, and he was able to take this thing at the 2007 Great American Bash. He was taking on Jimmy Wang Yang, Shannon Moore, Funaki, and Jamie Noble, as well as the then champion Chavo Guerrero, but yet Swogs went and did it. Surprise, surprise, 2 months later the belt was totally retired, and I tell you why it gets in at number 1, something to do with Hornswoggle. He proved he could go in the right circumstances, but Vicky Guerrero, the SmackDown GM, was like, oh, he's so small, he needs to be protected, so we have to take his title away, and we'll never talk about it again. I mean, all of that lineage, and all of that history, and all of that prestige, and that's what we did? Sorry, my friends, I'm going to be a nerd. That's ultimately disrespectful. None of the other belts that absolutely deserved a bigger send-off and they didn't get it. Make sure you let us know in the comments below before you like the video, share the video, and subscribe. And look, there's a video on the screen. I suggest you click it. Otherwise, I appreciate you, my friends. Thank you for joining me. Simon Miller, as always. You are the best. And I'll see you soon.